next slide, this shows you a deep dive into the inflation numbers. And as you can see on the left-hand side, there is CPI, which is the black line. And then you've got food inflation, which is the very violent, reddish orange line. And the yellow line is core CPI. The latest print of CPI was well within the RBI's comfort zone. It's even below the 4% target at 3.5%. But the reason for this really was a massive collapse in year-on-year inflation, because last year at this point of time, the year-on-year jump in inflation was very high. There was a base effect, therefore, which has caused this number to come down. But the main point that I will make is that inflation appears well contained. RBI's 4% target may still prove to be slightly challenging. RBI's own forecast is average inflation closer to 4.5% for the full year. But the good news is that core inflation is 3.4%. But I would also say we need to watch that core inflation number of 3.4% carefully, because if monetary policy remains in its current stance, which is withdrawal of accommodation and an excessive focus on curtailing liquidity, then you run the risk that eventually not only is that core inflation number may actually be reflective of a slowdown in growth as well. So I think we are now in territory where the MPC and the RBI will have to be slightly more careful about their next few steps, because core inflation is clearly indicating that things in the economy are very well contained outside of food inflation, and an attempt to pull down the headline inflation number further might actually be negative in terms of its impact on growth. The good news for India on the right-hand side, now the contribution of Brent crude to CPI directly is now very limited. Crude has a much bigger contribution in wholesale inflation than it has in CPI. But the good news for India is that oil prices have remained very well contained now for pretty much the last year, little more than a year. And therefore, this does not look to be a significant factor in gauging the outlook for inflation. And despite the ratcheting it up of tensions in the Middle East since October 2023, crude has largely tended to stay in a very tight band. And if anything, it's actually showing signs of breaking down lower rather than going up. So I think that's good news from India's point of view.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.